Welcome to this PyPark tutorial. In today's tutorial we're going to look at creating a web page and introducing you into something called classes. To get started, I've opened my web browser and I've opened Microsoft Visual Studio Code with a blank page. Let's first start by saving this page on my desktop. Now I'll save it as web.html. Remember that .html is incredibly important to make sure that your page opens up on the website. Hit save. Let's now go to my desktop and let's open up the website next to me. There we go. Let's now create the starting code. Now the great thing about Visual Studio Code is that you can cheat a little bit by typing an exclamation mark and pressing enter. You can ignore all the meta stuff and we can delete that. To get started, let's create some code. In the brief that you've got in the assignment, you should be able to find a few bits of code already. I'll copy and paste them over here. First, we're going to create a header. We're going to use a header1 tags to create this, and we'll call this box tags. Next, I'm going to create a paragraph. I've got an open and a closing paragraph tag, and I'm going to paste in the code that I put in the assignment. Here it is. It's a wall of text with a couple of BR tags which are used to break a line or to add a new line. Let's save this web page and let's refresh our screen. There we go. We have our header and we have our paragraph tag. Next, I'm going to add two boxes in for images. The idea is that we want to have two boxes which have 3 images inside them. To keep them all contained together, I'm going to use a div tag. And I'm going to use another div tag for the second box of images. The reason I'm using a div tag, div which stands for divider, is because I want to group all my images together into one tag. Next, I'm going to start pasting all of my images in. You should have the links to the images inside the assignments. If not, you can pause the video here to copy and paste what I've written over here. Remember, an image tag starts with the arrowhead at image. We define a source with the link that is inside the assignment, and then we close the image tag using the / arrowhead. You might notice that these image tags also have something called a class in them. We'll go over that in a little while. Lastly, I'm going to want to style my website by changing the way it looks. To do this, I could do it inline inside a tag, but a better way would be to create a style tag up in my head. Remember that the head tag is the information of your website, so I'm going to put the styling inside there. We'll start up here with a style tag, and we'll let it close with a closing style tag. In between the style tag, we can put CSS code. You might remember that if we type HTML code in here, it won't work anymore. That's because everything between the style tag is now CSS. Let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the entire background of my body into a different color. Let's just check that everything we've done has changed by saving our document and refreshing it. Got a lot of images there now. So let's change the style of the body. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to call the body tag. I'm going to use 2 curly brackets to hold all the properties that I want to change. I'm going to change the background color to orange. Let's save our document and let's check that has changed. There we go. I also want to put everything inside my web page inside the middle of the screen. Because everything in my web page is inside my body tag, I can change everything at once just by adding it inside the body. Let's make text align center as a property. That will now change everything inside my body tag into the center, or move it into the center of the web page. If I save this document and I refresh it, You can see that now everything is in the center because they're all inside my body tag. Next, let's look at styling the div tags. The div tags are what holds all my images in it. Now, I want to make all of my div tags the size of my web page. I can do this by changing all the div tags in my web page with just writing div. I can use the open and close curly brackets to change everything inside them. In this case, I'm going to make the width of my div tags the size of my screen, which is 2560 pixels. Your screen might be 1920. Mess around with this number until you get the size that you want. Remember what I said in the previous lesson. Every single tag that you use has a box around it with a transparent background. If I change the background color to red of my div, you're going to see each of my divs has a red background around it now. Yeah? Let's take that off. And you can also see that the image tags are now put next to each other. Images tend to want to be next to each other instead of on top of each other. So if you give them enough space, they will be right next to each other. Next, I want to change the background color of the first div to gold and the background of the second div to green. But I can't do that here because I'm calling all my divs over here. Let's give our divs a name. I'm going to go inside the tag. I'm going to give it an ID. Let's call this one div1. I'm going to copy this across. I'm going to call the second div div2. You can name this whatever you want, or you can follow what I've written over here. Now, to change the style of div1, I can't just write div1. Because it's an ID, I have to write hashtag div1. Now it knows that I'm looking for div1. Let's put our curly brackets, and let's change the background color to gold. Let's now copy this, paste it underneath. I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to change the ID to div2, keeping the hashtag there, and changing the background color to green. Let's save this, and now I'm going to refresh my screen. As you can see, the first div now has a background of gold, and the second div has a background color of green. Let's now look a little bit at the class attributes over here. We know that the ID tag is used to name a div, but you can also use a class tag to name a div or any other tag, like this image tag. The difference between them is that if you want to have multiple tags use the same property, for example, I've got div1_image for every single image tag, then we want to assign them to a class. If you're only going to have one element or one tag that's going to change with the ID, then you would call it ID. There is another difference between them as well. If we want to change a class, instead of a hashtag, we need to use a full stop. Let's do that. Let's call our div1_image tag. This will affect the 3 classes for the images. Remember, this is just a name that I've given to my image tag. And because I've got 3 image tags with the same name, I'm going to use class instead of ID. Let's give it some properties. The first property I'm going to give it is a width of 250 pixels. The second property is going to be a height of 150 pixels. Let's copy and paste this. And now I'm going to do it for my div2 tag. So let's change this to div2. Remember, if it's a class, you use a full stop. If it's an ID, you use a hashtag. If it's not a class and it's not an ID, you don't put anything. So let's change the property slightly for the div2 image. I'll put it at 350 pixels and 250 pixels high. And now let's save our code and let's refresh the web browser. There we go. You can see they're now a little bit better spaced. The bottom one is a little bit bigger because I've made all 3 of them bigger by changing the class one, which each of them has in their tags. Next, I want to style the images a little bit more by adding a border around the images and making them a bit more spaced out. I'm going to affect all the images in my web page. So that means rather than giving them a class attribute, I'm just going to call the image tag to change all the images inside my web page. Let's first give it a margin. A margin will add space around an object. So if you have an image and you add a margin to it, it'll add a bit of transparent space around the entire image. Let's add a margin of 10 pixels. Let's save this, and let's refresh our web page. As you can see, we now have 10 pixels of space around each of our images. Next, let's add a border. A border is written a little bit different from the rest of the properties. To create a border, we're going to type in border, then we're going to state how big we want the border to be. Let's make it 5 pixels. Next, we need to specify what type of border it is. Let's make it a solid border. You could also make it a dotted border or a dashed border, but let's stay with solid for now. Lastly, you need to specify the color that it needs to be. Let's make it black. If we save our work and we refresh our web page, you can see we've now got a border around that image. Thanks to the code that we've written, we've now got a complete web page with text, a header, images, and they're all different sized and they're all differently spaced. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful.